Hello everyone, welcome to another Bitcoin related tutorial. I've been debating for a while about whether to record this video or not, but I think with Core version 30 coming out potentially on Friday, that it's important to get the information out there even if there is some pushback. Basically what I want to discuss is running more than one Bitcoin NOTs node. Now the obvious pushback is that's just pumping up the numbers. It's not actually meaningful percentage of the network is switched to NOTs. But that's not actually the reason that I'm proposing. The idea is that when a Core version 30 node connects to another Core version 30 node, it's able to spread the spam between the two nodes on that connection. But for every connection from a Core version 30 node to a non-Core version 30 node, the spam is blocked on that connection. And so the idea is that we need to have the high enough percentage of the network to be not running Core version 30 so that the Core version 30 nodes are isolated and spam cannot spread the network very easily. Now the two normal ways that you would do that is you would get people who are running Bitcoin Core to either not upgrade to Core version 30 or to switch to Bitcoin NOTs. And the other way would be people who have not been running a node previously to start running a node. So those are the two areas that I think most people have been focused on. But the third area is those who are running Bitcoin NOTs should be running multiple nodes. In fact, as many as they can, because that will increase the percentage of NOTs nodes on the network. And what's good about that is each of the nodes that you're running are going to connect to a random set of peers. So the peers that each of your nodes connect to are going to be a different set of peers than each of your other nodes. So you're getting a more distributed presence on the network and contributing to adding resistance to the spam flowing across the network. So there's kind of a couple of ways that I wanted to address that in this tutorial. I want to show two perspectives. One is running Bitcoin NOTs on any computer that you have. Say you've got some extra computers, you got an old laptop or something that you're not using for anything. You can, but say you don't have a lot of disk space on there. You can run Bitcoin NOTs as a pruned node, and it doesn't use a lot of space. So that's the first thing I'm going to be showing in this video. And the second thing is, I talked recently about building a Start9 server for around $275, and that's running a full node. And that's great for your primary node, but if you're wanting to have a second or third node, you don't need to spend that much if you're just going to use it to be running a pruned node. So what I want to show in this video as well is how to build a Start9 server that's running a pruned Bitcoin NOTs node. And you can build that for about $65. So I'm going to start first with the how to run Bitcoin NOTs on any computer as a pruned node. I just want to show that it's super easy. The idea would be you'd get your computer out, if it doesn't have an operating system on it, or maybe you're worried about Windows 10 end of life and you're worried about security, you can install Linux on there, for example. But basically you would just get your computer up and running, and then whatever the operating system is on there, you install Bitcoin NOTs, and then you'd set it to run as a pruned node. And I'll show you how easy that is. So I'm going to go over to Alright, so I'm going to go over to my browser, and we're going to download Bitcoin NOTs. So this is a fresh computer here that it does not have Bitcoin Core or Bitcoin NOTs running on it. It's just a clean installation of Linux. I'm going to search for NOTs, GitHub. Okay, we're going to go to the one on github.com. And then we're in the Bitcoin NOTs page, and we're going to go to the Bitcoin repository. Okay, so take note of the URL. It should be github.com/Bitcoin NOTs/Bitcoin. And then we're going to go over to the latest release, and we're going to click on that. And here we're going to scroll down until we get to the assets. Okay, so here we have 33 assets, and we're going to get the one that is for whatever operating system we're running. In my case, I'm on Linux, so I'm going to get this one that says x8664-Linux. So I'm going to go ahead and download that one. Okay, so if you're running on a Mac, you're probably going to get the Apple Darwin, and if you are running on Windows, let's see here, Win64, and you got like a setup unsigned. So I went through these as well on a previous video. It's called Switching from Core to NOTs on Windows, Mac, and Linux. So go back and watch that video, and that'll show you how to install Bitcoin NOTs on all three of the operating systems. It'll be the same if you're not, even if you're just installing Bitcoin NOTs fresh instead of switching from Core to NOTs. The very first step is to shut down Bitcoin Core. So you just skip past that and then pick it up right after that. So each of the operating system is demonstrated over there, but what I'm showing in this video, rather than repeating that, is I'm just going to show you how to run Bitcoin NOTs as a pruned node. So let me go ahead and run Bitcoin NOTs here. Okay, so whenever you run Bitcoin NOTs the first time, all you're going to do to make sure that it's a pruned node is to have the Limit Blockchain Storage to checkbox checked. Okay, and it should put in a value that's sufficient to restore backup 6 days old, and it's about 2 gigabytes. So you want about 2 gigabytes of free space. And then you can also check this box to skip validation of transactions until after this particular block. This will make the IBD run faster, especially if your computer does not have an SSD. All right, so that's it. You just check those 2 checkboxes, which it will be. They should be checked by default if you have less than a terabyte of storage, and then you just click OK, and that's it. So now you just wait for the IBD to complete, just like you normally would. Okay, so the point of showing that was just that it's very easy to run Bitcoin NOTs as a pruned node. It doesn't require any special knowledge. You just download and install the program when you first launch it, check the checkboxes to tell it to run as a pruned node. And like I said, that second checkbox is if you don't have an SSD and you want to speed up the initial blockchain download, maybe you don't have a lot of RAM on your computer, that'll make the IBD go faster and get your node online quickly. Like I'll post a link to the switching from Core to NOTs on Windows, Mac, and Linux video, so that if you want to do the next steps, they're not required, but if you want to like have your node counted on the dashboards or whatever, you can go through those next steps as well. But to the main tutorial that I wanted to show today is how to build a Start9 server for about $65, which you can do if you are running Bitcoin NOTs as a pruned node. Okay, the first thing we're going to get is a used or refurbished mini PC. You can usually find the best deals on the Lenovo ThinkCentre Tiny. So I would go to eBay, search for ThinkCentre Tiny, and then what you're going to do is filter your results down to devices that have either 16 or 8 gigabytes of RAM. And then we're going to go to listings where they have the buy it now option. Now you can do the auctions, and you can usually get a better deal if you do the auction, but if you want your device right away, you want to filter down to just the listings that have a buy it now option. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then we're going to sort by price plus shipping, lowest first. Okay, now there are a bunch of different models of ThinkCentre Tiny, so we're not really concerned about the specific model. What we are looking for is that it has at least 8 gigabytes of RAM, and it doesn't need to have a hard drive because we're going to be buying a SATA SSD separately. This is probably the best deal here. Looks like a M710Q. This one has 8 gigabytes of RAM. It has a 500 gigabyte HD, which we would take out and put in the SATA SSD. But this is $35 free delivery, so this is probably the best deal. But I've budgeted $47 for the mini PC. You can see there's a lot of listings that have less than $47. So this is about $45 for these two. It's $45 for this one. Here's one for $46. And then it starts to get above $47 here. The other thing you're looking for are listings that have the power supply, because you're going to pay a little more if you buy the device and the power supply separately. And usually you can see in the picture if it has the power supply with it, like these first three do. Sometimes if it doesn't show in the power supply in the picture, it'll say in the listing title. Like this one says with power supply, so this one would have the power supply. Otherwise, if it doesn't say, you should ask the person who's listing whether it comes with the power supply or not. And avoid the ones that don't come with a power supply unless they're like a really good deal, because the power supply is going to run you probably $15 to buy it separately. So get one that has a power supply. Like I said, this would probably be the best deal. This would be $35, which is well under the $47 that we budgeted. Okay, so once you get the mini PC, the next thing you're going to need is 128 gigabytes of storage. For that, we're going to hop over to Amazon and we're going to search for 128 gigabyte SATA SSD. And so for this, I've budgeted $14. You can find a lot of listings like this one here. That's $14. Here's another one that's $14. Here's one that's $13. So yeah, you can get 120 gigabyte SATA SSD. That's these flat square ones like this, right? These are the SATA SSDs. Look like rectangles, little flat rectangles. Okay, so that's what you want to get, one of those. And like I said, I've budgeted $14 for that. And then the last thing that you want is an Ethernet cable. All right, and I've budgeted $4 for that. So here's one here, Cat 7 Ethernet cable, $4. Right? So if we got those at that price that we budgeted, the ThinkCentre Tiny PC for $47, the 128 gigabyte SSD for $14, and the Ethernet cable for $4, that comes to $65. So we can build our server for $65 if we stay within that budget. Okay, so here are the parts that we're going to use to build our Start9 server. We've got the Lenovo ThinkCentre Tiny PC and the power supply. We've budgeted $47 for that. Then we have the 128 gigabyte SSD, which we budgeted $14 for that. And we have the Ethernet cable, which we budgeted $4 for. In addition to those, we're going to need a USB thumb drive. I've not added the price of this to the budget because I assume most people have one of these, but if you don't, you're going to need to get one. It doesn't need to be a very big one. You could probably get an 8 gigabyte one. It'd work just fine. This is a 32 gigabyte SanDisk. And the other thing you're going to need is a Phillips screwdriver, just a normal Phillips screwdriver. I did not budget for that because I think most people probably have one of those, but if not, you'll need to get one of those as well. Okay, so there are a bunch of different variations for the Lenovo ThinkCentre Tiny PCs. So I'm going to show a couple that I have, but yours may look different on the inside, but they usually follow a similar pattern. The first thing you do is you'll remove the screw out of the back. And then you'll pull the front towards you, and then it comes off like this. Okay, so this is probably the most complex variation that I've seen. For this one, they've got a tray that clips into here, and then the drive goes inside of here. So when you open up your mini PC, when you get it, if there's any drives inside, you need to remove them. So in this case, I've got this 500 gigabyte HDD that's in there. I need to remove that. So if you have this variation, there's a little tray, there's an arrow here that you can put your finger in and push, and then it pulls the tray will come out like this. Now you want to be careful because there's a SATA ribbon cable. You don't want to rip that off of the motherboard. So you want to remove that, but take note of how it's positioned. You can see here that there are two connectors that it connected to. There's a big one and a small one. The big one is to the left. You can see that matches the cable as well. The big one is to the left and the small one is to the right. So you want to remember that that's how it was situated. So when we put our SATA drive in, we can put it back the same way. Okay, now you're going to look underneath there. There may be an NVMe drive. If you see an NVMe drive in here, you're going to remove it as well. This particular variant does not have an NVMe drive in it. If you have one that has a tray like this, the way the tray works is you have to pull the edges of the tray out like this, and then you can pull the drive out. Basically what it has is 4 studs, and those studs go into the screw holes on the side of the drive. Right, so to get it out, you have to pull the side of the drive out a little bit so you can pull that out. And once one side is out, then you can pull the drive out like that. Okay, now you're going to remember the way it was in there. So we flipped it over. So we had it originally with the large size to the left, small size to the right. We flip it over, so now the small is to the right and the largest to the left. Okay, so we're going to remember that that's how the drive was in there. So we can put our new drive in. We'll put this one in, and it's kind of the same way. We're going to put the studs into the holes in the side. You can see there's holes in the side. There's the studs. I'm going to put it in there like that. So the same way the other one came out, and then we pull the corners out so that we can fit the studs into those holes in the side. Okay, so now it's in place. We flip it back over, and we should have the large one to the left like we started and the small one to the right. Okay, now we can take the SATA ribbon cable, and if everything's matched up, the large port on the left and the small one on the right, it should plug in like that. Okay, then the last thing is to get the tray back in, and so you can see there's these blue notches on the sides here. Those go into these divots in the side of the case. So you sort of slide them under there like this. You can see let me lift it up so it's visible here. You can see that those blue notches are inside those 2 digits. Okay. Then we have to be careful of the fan cable right here. So I'm going to pull that out of the way a little bit, and then just push this down into there. Oops. Try this again. Get the cable out of the way. Push it down into there, and it should snap into place. Okay, so now we've got the SATA SSD installed. We also want to make sure that there's not an NVMe in here. So some of the models have an NVMe. This one did not have an NVMe under the SATA drive, but some models have the NVMe on the other side. So while you have it open, just flip it over, and then you can pull this bottom panel off just by pushing it forward like that. And some of the models have an NVMe drive right down here. So you can see this one does. You want to remove that. You want to have just the SATA drive that we added. We don't want to have any other drives in here. Otherwise we might have a problem booting it up. So we'll go ahead and remove that. Basically what you have is this blue clip that, instead of having a screw like you saw in my last video where you had to take the screw in and out, these Lenovo Tiny PCs have this blue clip. It just has a little peg that goes down into the hole here, and that's what holds it. And to pull it out, you just lift it up. Okay, so if we had our NVMe drive, if you were installing an NVMe drive or removing it, you just put it down like that, and the blue piece goes in like that. And then take it out, we just pull it up and lift up the drive. And then put the peg down again. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and put this back on. Okay. And now we're ready to close up this mini PC. Just basically the opposite of the way it came off. Hopefully you can see that. This lid just goes on straight down and then push it back. And then we put the screw in. Okay, so that's how we do that particular variant. I've got another variant I want to show you. Okay, this one is a M900. Okay, like before, we're going to find the screw on the back and take it out. And then we're going to pull the front forward just like we did before, and then the lid will come off. Right, so that part's the same on all the models. This one's a little bit different. You see we don't have a tray. It just has the drive sitting in here like this. I'm going to go ahead and pull that out. It just needs to pull straight away from, you can see there is a port that is plugged into here. We're just pulling it straight out this direction. Okay. Right, on this model you can see that we have an NVMe right underneath the SATA. So like before, we'll pull that clip up and then pull out the NVMe drive, and then we'll put that peg back down in there into that hole. Okay. Now, if you didn't see an NVMe drive under the SATA drive, you can, like before, turn it over, see if there's a panel on the bottom. This particular one does not have a panel on the bottom, so we've got all the drives removed now. Okay, so now you're going to take your drive that you're going to put in, the 128 gigabyte SATA SSD, and you're going to line it up. You can see that there's a small connector here and a large connector to the right of it. So we want to line our drive up the same way. We've got the small one and the large one. Just plug that in, and then we'll close up our tiny PC. And we'll put the screw back in. Okay, so they all more or less follow a similar pattern. You got a screw on the back, you pull the panel off, you have a drive. You may have an NVMe underneath the drive, you may have a bottom panel that has an NVMe on it, or there may not be an NVMe at all. Some of the models don't have NVMe. All right, so whichever way that is, then you'll take all the drives out, put your new drive that you purchased in, and then put it back together and put the screw back in. If you get a model that's a little weird and you can't figure it out, just stop by the forum at paulscode.com and I can help you out. I've done a number of these different models, but I've obviously not seen every model because there's a lot of them. So if you see something weird, just hop by the forum and I'll help you out. Okay, the next step is to flash the Start9 operating system onto our USB thumb drive. For that, we're going to use a program called Balena Etcher. We're going to go to etcher.balena.io. Then we're going to click on Download Etcher. And the reason that we're using Balena Etcher is because it's the same on Windows, Mac, and Linux. So you'll be able to follow along whatever operating system you're running. I've already installed this, but this is where you would download it and install it. Okay, and the next thing we're going to download is the Start9 operating system ISO file. For that, we're going to search for Start9 GitHub. And we're going to go to the link to github.com. This is the Start9 page. We're going to click on repositories. And here we're going to click on StartOS. Okay, so take note of the URL. It is github.com/start9labs/startos. And here we're going to click on the link to the latest release, which at the time of this video is v0.3.5.1. And then we're going to scroll down to the assets. And the asset that we want is StartOS 0.3.5.1, a bunch of numbers and letters, x86_64.iso. We're going to click on that one to download it. Okay, now that we've downloaded the Start9 operating system ISO file, we're going to use Balena Etcher to flash it onto our USB thumb drive. So we'll start by plugging the thumb drive in. And if anything pops up, just go ahead and close it, and then launch Balena Etcher. Here we're going to click on Flash from File, and we're going to select the ISO file that we downloaded. Then we're going to click Select Target, and we're going to choose our USB thumb drive. And finally, we're going to click on Flash. And now we'll just wait for it to finish flashing the Start9 operating system onto our USB thumb drive. Okay, so once the flash is complete, go ahead and close Balena Etcher and remove your USB thumb drive. Okay, now we've got the Start9 operating system flashed onto our USB thumb drive. Let's go ahead and hook everything up. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is plug in the Ethernet cable. And the Ethernet port is typically on the back. Now the ports will be arranged differently depending on what model you get. But you just plug in the Ethernet cable. Now the other end of the cable is going to go to your router. Then we're going to plug in the USB thumb drive into one of the back ports. I've noticed that on some models, if you plug the USB into one of the front ports, it will not boot from it. So we're going to go ahead and plug it into one of the back ports. So that seems to be more reliable. If you find that you have a problem with a particular port, try booting from different ports. Just move the USB thumb drive to one of the other ports. I think the one on the edge typically seems to work. Sometimes it looks a little different. It'll be like a metal, sort of like this display port looks. You'll see one of the USB ports that looks like that. So if you see one that looks special, go ahead and use it. Otherwise, just pick one of the ones on the bottom. I think this one over here on the edge typically works. All right, and then we're going to plug in the power supply. And that goes into the rectangular yellow port. All right, and then you can check the front. If it turns on automatically, we're good. Otherwise, you'll press the power button to turn it on. And now we're just going to wait a couple of minutes for it to boot up and connect to the network. Okay, at this point we're just going to wait a couple of minutes for the server to boot up and connect to the network. You may hear a few beeps during the process depending on the model. Some of the models have an internal speaker and some don't. So you may hear some beeps, but you're just going to wait a couple of minutes for it to connect to the network. Okay, and so now it's been a couple of minutes. We're going to go ahead and see if it's finished connecting. We're going to open the browser and we're going to type in http://start.local. And we'll do this from another computer that's on the same network, or you can do this from your phone. Okay, looks like it's booted up. So the first thing it asks you to do is select a disk, but there should only be one option to select. So you're going to go ahead and click on it, and then you're going to click on Install StartOS. It says it's going to completely erase the disk, which is fine because there's only one disk in there, and we're going to click Continue. And now we'll just wait for it to finish installing StartOS. Okay, it is finished installing. It says to please remove the USB stick and reboot your device to begin using your new Start9 server. So we're going to go ahead and remove the USB stick. And then we'll click on reboot. It says please wait for StartOS to restart and then refresh this page. Okay, so now it's been a couple of minutes, so I'm going to go ahead and refresh the page. Alright, at this point our server is in the state that it would be if you had purchased one of the servers from the Start9 store. Basically whenever your server arrives it shows this screen where you can select Start Fresh or Recover. We're going to select Start Fresh. It's going to ask you to select the storage device. There should be only one, so you're going to click on it. And then it's going to ask you to create a master password for your server. Be sure to write this down, put it in a safe location, because if you forget this, you're going to lose access to your server. Okay, and then we're going to click Finish. And then we'll just wait a few minutes for it to finish initializing StartOS. Okay, so it shows that setup is complete. The next step we're going to do is download the address information. It may ask you if you want to keep the file. If it does, go ahead and select Keep. And we'll go ahead and open this up. This tells you the name of your server. It'll create a random name for your server. In my case, it called it selflessmoocher.local. So if you forget that, you can come back to this file and it'll tell you the name of your server. It also gives you links to the instructions, a place to download your certificate, and a bunch of other useful information. We're not going to be using that now, but if we need to come back to that information, this is how we can get it, is with that file that we downloaded. The next thing we're going to do is move on to Trust Your Root CA. So for this, we're going to click on the Open link here. Okay. And so this says, download and trust your server's root certificate authority to establish a secure connection with your server. You'll need to repeat this on every device that you use to connect to your server. Okay, so you could be doing this from Windows, Mac, or Linux, whatever browser you're running, or it could be from your Android phone or your iPhone. You can do this setup from any device that you want to connect to your server from. So the first step is to bookmark this page. So I'll go ahead and do that. And I'll call it Selfless Moocher. That's just, I'm using the name of my server. You can call it whatever. You can call it StartOS, my server, whatever. You can call it any name you want. I'm going to click on Done. Step 2 says download your server's root certificate authority. We're going to go ahead and click on Download for that. If it asks you if you want to keep the file, go ahead and click on Keep. A lot of times the operating system will consider a certificate file to be a dangerous file, so you want to tell it that you want to download it for sure. Okay, so now we have in our downloads, we've got this selflessmoocher.crt file. That's our certificate. It says the next thing we want to do is trust the root certificate by following these instructions. So we'll click on View Instructions, and this brings us to the Start9 documentation. If you ever need to come back here, it's just docs.start9.com, and they have a lot of useful documentation. This is the documentation on how to trust your root certificate. So it shows how to download the certificate. We've already downloaded. That's that selflessmoocher.crt file. Yours will be named whatever your server name is. So this is just telling you different ways you can download your certificate. We've already downloaded it, so we're going to move down to step 2, trusting. And it says to trust your root CA, select the operating system and follow the guide. All right, So whatever operating system you're on, you're going to select that and just follow the instructions. I'm on Linux, so I'm going to go ahead and click that. Okay, so I've completed all those steps. You'll follow whichever instructions are for your particular operating system. One thing I want to show is if you are on Chrome or Brave, the instructions are a little bit different. So it says you need to complete this final step, so we'll click on that. Okay, so the instructions say to go to this URL. And it says to select the Authorities tab, select Import, and then select your certificate file and check Trust this certificate. It looks like, though, that Chrome has changed how it works since these instructions were written. The way it actually works is you have to go to Local Certificates on the left, and you have to go under Custom, and then there are certificates installed by you. So you're going to click on that, and from here you're going to click on Import, and then you're going to select that certificate that you downloaded, and then it should show up in the list. So Selfless Moocher is now in the list. Okay, so that's all we have to do. It doesn't follow this process here. All right, so it says the last step is to test by clicking on refresh. So let's click on refresh. It says your root CA is trusted. You have successfully trusted your server's root certificate and may now log in securely. So that gives you a link to the login page. Okay, and here you're going to enter that password that you created earlier. Okay, so now we've got our server up and running, and to install Bitcoin Knots, we're going to go to the marketplace, and here we're going to change to the community registry. So click on change, select the community registry, and click on connect. And here we're going to click on the Bitcoin tab, and we're going to select Bitcoin Knots and install it. You can click this button View Install to show you the progress of the installation. Okay, so now we need to configure Bitcoin Knots. And remember, we need it to run as a pruned node because we do not have enough space for a full node. Now the nice thing is it's actually going to set that up automatically because it detects that there's not enough space to run a full node. So if you click on Advanced and you scroll down, you can see that we have pruning mode set here. Now if we had more space, it would have said we would have an option to enable or disable pruning. And if you had like a bunch of space but you still wanted to have a prune node, you can select enable on that. But since we don't have enough space, it doesn't even give us that option. It just immediately shows us that we're on pruning mode, automatic. And we can select the max chain size. I'm just going to leave it as default. It says we're going to keep basically 550 megabytes of data. All right, so anything beyond that will get pruned, and it'll just keep the most recent 555 megabytes of block data. So we'll go ahead and click on Save. One other thing I should mention, if you want to filter out the runes, which are, I consider that spam, that's a non-monetary, you can click on Reject Tokens, you can enable that. Okay. Otherwise, the defaults are pretty good. They filter out the inscriptions, they filter out large op returns and so on, just by default. You don't really have to change anything. But if you want to also filter out runes, go ahead and enable Reject Tokens. Okay, so now we've finished configuring Bitcoin Knots as a pruned node. We'll go ahead and click on Start. And so now all we have to do is just wait for it to finish the initial blockchain download. Since we have only 8 gigabytes of RAM, it's going to take a while, and you will see that it has a message saying that it timed out, restarting soon. You'll see that a bunch. With 8 gigabytes of RAM, it'll take a couple of weeks at least to finish the IBD, but just be patient, it'll finish eventually. If you get a model that has 16 gigabytes of RAM, this will usually complete within about a day or two, depending on other factors, CPU speeds and so on, but the primary factor is the RAM. So if you have 16 gigabytes of RAM or more, it'll complete in about a day or two. And if you have 8 gigabytes of RAM, it's going to take at least a couple of weeks to finish the IBD. So you just be patient and let it finish, and then you'll have Bitcoin Knots running as a pruned node on your Start9 server. Okay, that's it. We now have a Start9 server up and running. It only cost us $65, and we have another instance of Bitcoin knots on the network helping to slow down the spread of spam. So I highly encourage you to run as many Bitcoin knots nodes as you can afford to do. And if you need any help, stop by my forum at paulscode.com, and I'll see you in the next video.